A poor single mom works 3 jobs to make ends meet, but a millionaire CEO invites her to a luxurious dinner and surprises her. Claire's heart thundered as she pressed her back against the cold concrete wall of the deserted alley. Her thin coat did nothing to stop the biting wind that seeped through every seam. The street lamp overhead flickered, casting jittery shadows on her trembling form. In her hands, she clutched a single white envelope, an eviction notice. The bold black letters glared up at her with a finality that made her stomach twist into knots. Ringing in her ears was the voice of her tiny daughter, Lily, wondering where they would sleep if the landlord locked them out for good. Suddenly, headlights swept across the alley, momentarily blinding her. Her pulse quickened when the door of a sleek black limousine opened just a few feet away. She froze, fear and curiosity locked in a breathless dance. A tall, elegant figure stepped out, the glow from the street lamp illuminating a sharp suit and an unreadable expression. Somehow Claire knew this stranger was no ordinary bystander, and his presence at this very moment felt like a twist of fate. For reasons beyond her understanding, everything in her world was about to change. Claire Thompson had never intended to end up like this, barely able to feed her daughter, weighed down by 3 grueling jobs, and living in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment in the roughest part of the city. But the moment she held tiny Lily in her arms 6 years ago, fresh from a harrowing labor, she'd sworn she would do anything to keep that perfect little human safe and healthy. The promises came easily. Fulfilling them was another story. She'd thought she was in love with Lily's father, Darren, and he had seemed overjoyed about the baby. But Darren's easy smile turned to panic the moment finances became tight. One day, the man she believed would stand by her forever vanished without a trace, leaving an empty dresser, a few leftover clothes in the hamper, and a 3-sentence goodbye note on the kitchen table. At first, Claire was devastated. She called the phone company, thinking maybe there was some mistake with his cell service. Then she pleaded with mutual friends to track him down. But he was gone, and with him, the sense of stability she had once clung to. Over the years, she'd developed a kind of numb acceptance. If she had to do this alone, so be it. Lily was all she needed to keep going. Now, 6 years later, Claire's daily routine bordered on torturous. First came the early morning shift at Becky's Diner, where she balanced stacks of plates up her arms, weaving around boisterous families and half-awake truckers. She forced a smile, scribbled down orders, and said, "Have a lovely day," while inwardly calculating her tips. If she was lucky, they would be enough to buy groceries for the week. From there, she hustled to a corporate building where she worked as a janitor, cleaning the echoing hallways, scrubbing bathrooms, and wiping away footprints from the polished floors. The plush interior and elegant decor reminded her that she was in a world that never quite belonged to her. She kept her head down, pushed her cleaning cart, and tried not to feel that pang of envy when she saw employees stepping out in expensive suits, tapping away on the newest smartphones. Her final shift of the day was at a grimy convenience store 2 blocks from her apartment. There, she manned the register, scanning items for customers who looked just as worn down as she felt. By the time she got back to Lily, who stayed with a kindly neighbor during Claire's late shifts, she was too exhausted to do more than kiss her daughter goodnight and collapse into bed. And then, there was the letter. She'd known it was coming. The landlord had hinted at raising the rent. She'd prayed he might wait a little longer, or maybe she'd have a stroke of luck and find a higher-paying position. But luck was not something she'd ever had in abundance. Claire stared at the eviction notice in her hands. It was stark, straightforward, and entirely impossible to fight. She was already behind on rent, and no matter how many extra shifts she picked up, she couldn't conjure the lump sum they demanded. The landlord had given her 2 weeks. 2 weeks to either miraculously pay everything she owed, or find a new place for herself and Lily. "Mom?" Lily's small voice cut through the suffocating haze of Claire's thoughts. She turned, quickly setting the paper aside. The last thing she wanted was for her daughter to see the panic etched on her face. Lily wore a faded pink nightgown, her hair sticking out in messy pigtails Claire had tried to braid earlier. "Yes, sweetheart?" Lily shuffled her feet. "Mrs. Gonzalez gave me cookies after school. I saved one for you." She held out a slightly crumbled chocolate chip cookie, a triumphant smile beaming from her soft features. Claire's throat tightened. This child never failed to remind her of life's simple, beautiful gestures. "Thank you, baby." She took the cookie, tears stinging her eyes. She held Lily close, inhaling the faint scent of baby shampoo. In that moment, she resolved she would find a way. She had to. She tucked Lily into bed and watched her drift off, the faint hum of city traffic filtering through the thin apartment walls. The night was long and sleepless. She lay in bed, mind churning, searching for a solution, any solution, while the clock ticked ominously closer to her eviction deadline. The next morning, Claire began her day with the routine that had become second nature. Wake up at 4:30 a.m., tiptoe around Lily's bed so as not to disturb her, dress quietly in the small bathroom under the flickering fluorescent light, and make the 20-minute walk to Becky's diner. Becky's was a small, family-owned place, and Becky herself was a kind woman who had given Claire this job no questions asked. She'd even provided a flexible schedule so Claire could manage her other part-time gigs. But tips on a weekday morning were painfully meager, and Claire could feel the intangible weight of her overdue bills pressing down on her shoulders. That day, as she hurried to clear a table, her manager, Stan, emerged from the kitchen in a huff. "Got a big group coming in soon," he said, hastily wiping his sweaty brow. "Some meeting. They called ahead. We need this place spotless, you hear?" "Yes, Stan," Claire answered automatically, not daring to explain she was already doing that. She grabbed a rag and a spray bottle, scrubbing the last bit of maple syrup off a tabletop while scanning the diner's entrance. Sure enough, a few minutes later, a small crowd strolled in, men and women in sleek office attire, one or two clutching expensive briefcases. They looked so out of place in this humble establishment that Claire found herself staring a bit longer than usual. One man in particular, tall, with perfectly styled dark hair and piercing blue eyes, caught her attention. He seemed strangely at ease in their modest setting, offering polite smiles to the staff as he followed the hostess. His suit looked tailor-made, accentuating broad shoulders and a confident stance. Claire's stomach fluttered with a mix of curiosity and intimidation. She snapped out of it. If Stan caught her gawking, she'd never hear the end of it. Swallowing hard, she approached their table, notepad in hand. "Good morning, folks," she said, mustering her brightest, most professional smile. "Welcome to Becky's. Can I start you all off with coffee or orange juice?" The man with the piercing blue eyes gave her an appreciative nod. "Coffee would be great, thank you." His voice was smooth yet authoritative. She nodded politely, taking everyone's orders. Though they all seemed engrossed in conversation, talk about quarterly reports, expansions, mergers, Claire could sense the man's gaze flickering toward her from time to time. She tried to remain poised, but a prickling heat rose in her cheeks. Why did she feel so self-conscious? Once she delivered their drinks, the group dove deeper into business talk. Words like market shares and projections hung in the air, sounding foreign and sophisticated in the diner's cozy environment. Claire diligently refilled cups and cleared plates, her mind a swirl of questions about who these people were. As the group got up to leave, the tall man placed a generous tip on the table. Claire's eyes widened. It was more than she typically earned in a whole morning shift. When she thanked him, he offered a gentle smile that reached his eyes. He opened his mouth to say something, but his phone rang. After a quick glance, he grabbed it, apologized, and stepped away. Moments later, they were all gone, swept out the door as swiftly as they had arrived. Stan ambled over, picking up the cash and whistling low. "Whoa, big tip. Wish they'd meet here more often." Claire blushed. Yes, it was unexpected. Who was that man? And why did she feel like her world had tilted slightly on its axis from a simple encounter? She tried to brush off the feeling. This wasn't the first time she had served wealthy customers, after all. Yet something about him lingered in her mind. Little did Claire know, the next time she saw him would be under vastly different circumstances. By the end of her shift at Becky's, Claire's feet ached, and she still had a full day of work ahead. She caught the bus to the downtown corporate high-rise where she cleaned. The ride was cramped, and she clutched the overhead railing to keep her balance. At least this gave her time to think. She mentally rearranged her budget, hoping to stretch her paychecks and tips enough to cover groceries, Lily's school supplies, and a portion of the rent she still owed. Upon arrival, she hustled through the lobby, swiping her employee ID at the security desk. The building's interior was marble-floored and shimmering, a direct contrast to her own scuffed shoes and secondhand uniform. As she navigated to the maintenance closet, she offered a polite smile to the security guard. He barely acknowledged her, eyes glued to the array of monitors in front of him. The tasks were always the same: empty the trash in the executive offices, wipe down glass doors, vacuum carpets in conference rooms. But at least the pay was slightly better than the diner. That day, she was assigned to the top floor, the floor where the building's most prominent tenants had their offices. Few people saw janitors as anything more than part of the background, so Claire learned to move about silently, like a ghost cleaning up after a party. It was near the end of her shift when she found herself pushing a wheeled cleaning cart into a large corner office. The interior was immaculate, floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city, a massive desk made of dark mahogany, sleek furniture that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. It looked like the domain of someone important, someone with power. She placed the trash bin on a table to replace the liner when she noticed a nameplate on the desk: James Harlow. Claire froze. The name sounded vaguely familiar. She racked her brain. Wasn't that the name on the coffee mug earlier that day at the diner? Had she glimpsed it on the side of an expensive business binder? In her memory, she pictured the tall man with the piercing blue eyes. Could it be him? Just then, the door opened. In strolled James Harlow himself, speaking into a phone. Claire's heart kicked into overdrive. Her mind screeched at her to do something, maybe hide, but it was too late. He looked up, saw her, and paused. Her mind flashed to a humiliating possibility. Was she about to get scolded for being in the wrong office at the wrong time? Instead, James ended his call swiftly, slipping the phone into his pocket. He gave her a polite, surprised smile. "It's you," he said, raising an eyebrow as he set a leather-bound folder on the desk. "I recognize you from the diner." She swallowed hard, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Yes, sir. I just work here part-time as well. Sorry, I'm just finishing up." He waved a hand dismissively. "Don't apologize. You're just doing your job." For a moment, an awkward silence stretched between them. Claire fidgeted with the trash bin, unsure where to direct her gaze. He stood there, watching her with an expression that was neither dismissive nor pitying. It was something else, an earnest curiosity. "I didn't catch your name earlier," he said finally. She dared a fleeting glance at his face. "It's Claire Thompson." He nodded. "Claire," he repeated, as though testing how the name felt on his tongue. "Well, Claire Thompson, that was a busy morning at the diner. Thank you for the excellent service." It took her a second to register his words. He was thanking her? "Oh, thank you. For the tip, I mean. That was really generous." He waved it off. "The food was good and the service was great. It was the least I could do." She returned her attention to the trash bin, hoping to finish quickly and leave before her anxiety made her do something embarrassing. But to her surprise, James continued talking. "You work multiple jobs, I presume?" Her gaze flickered to him, guarded. "Yes, 3 actually." He nodded, looking pensive. "That must be tough." "It is," she admitted softly, before clamping her mouth shut. She wasn't sure what he wanted to hear. This was, after all, the CEO of a major company, the type of man who probably never worried about paying rent or needing to skip meals to make ends meet. He leaned against his desk casually, crossing his arms. "Look, I won't keep you if you're in a hurry, but would you mind if I asked you something?" Her heart stuttered. She almost dropped the bin. "Sure." James hesitated for the first time, as if weighing his words. "It's just we've got an executive dinner tomorrow evening. A handful of CEOs and investors will be there. The venue is top-notch, but personally, these gatherings can be painfully dull. I was wondering if maybe you'd like to come." Claire's mind stilled, as if someone had pressed pause on her entire reality. This had to be a trick, some bizarre joke. Why on earth would a man like James Harlow invite her, a janitor, a diner waitress, a single mom, to a high-profile dinner? She managed a shaky laugh, assuming he was being polite or facetious. "I'm just the cleaning lady." He shrugged. "Sometimes the cleaning lady is more interesting than an entire room of corporate suits. Plus, I owe you a better tip." The warm amusement in his tone suggested he was serious. She wanted to say something, anything, but her words came out jumbled. I have a daughter. Tomorrow night might be difficult. I have my third job. I see, he said, expression contemplative. Well, if you change your mind, here's my card. He took a sleek black card from his wallet, setting it gently on the desk. Give me a call or text if you can make it. No pressure. She stared at the card like it was a foreign object. Something about this invitation felt both exhilarating and terrifying. With a respectful nod, he stepped past her and headed for the door. Claire heard it click shut, leaving her alone in the quiet opulence of his office. Her mind reeled. This was ridiculous. She couldn't possibly mingle with millionaires. She didn't even have a dress that fit properly. Her postpartum body was always a point of self-consciousness, and her finances barely covered essential clothes for Lily. After finishing her shift, she found herself standing on the sidewalk outside the building, gripping James's business card. Rationality told her to toss it away, pretend it never happened. She had no time for fairy tale illusions or improbable daydreams. But she also felt a small ember of curiosity flare in her chest, a part of her that wanted to believe, just for a moment, that maybe life had something extraordinary in store. That night, Claire arrived home to find Lily already asleep under Mrs. Gonzalez's watchful eye. She thanked the older woman profusely, paid her a small fee, and then gently lifted Lily into bed. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. The child deserved better than this cramped apartment, constant budgeting stress, and her mother's near-constant exhaustion. Sighing, Claire settled onto the couch, rummaging through her purse. She pulled out James's business card. The name printed there in embossed silver ink almost glowed under the single lamp in the living room. James Harlow, CEO, Harlow Innovations. A phone number, an email, even a personal note scrawled on the back, in case you decide to come, James. She traced the letters with her fingertip. Dread, excitement, shame, and curiosity wrestled in her gut. He had seemed sincere, but she couldn't fathom why a man like him would go out of his way for her. Could it be a cruel prank? Or maybe a fleeting whim he would quickly forget? She placed the card on the coffee table, reminding herself that she had to be practical. She had a convenience store shift tomorrow night. Missing it would cost her desperately needed income. Then again, the tips she could get at the store in one night might not compare to whatever outcome could arise from meeting someone with James's connections and resources. It was a gamble she wasn't sure she had the luxury to take. In the end, she set her alarm for 5 a.m, 15 minutes later than usual, and crawled into bed, mind far from settled. The next day at Becky's diner, she tried to focus on her tables, but her mind kept drifting to James's invitation. While pouring coffee for an elderly couple, she found herself daydreaming about wearing something elegant, stepping into a luxurious venue, sipping expensive wine. She quickly snapped out of it. Daydreams were for people with time and money, neither of which she had in surplus. But the possibility nagged at her, refusing to be silenced. During her short break, she texted Mrs. Gonzalez, asking if there was any chance she could watch Lily the following night. The older woman was happy to oblige. That was the easy part. The real question, did Claire have the nerve to actually go? She decided to confide in her best friend, Jasmine, who also worked at the diner during the lunch shift. Jasmine was a single mother too, though her situation was marginally more stable thanks to some family support. "You got invited to a high-profile dinner by some hotshot CEO," Jasmine exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. "Girl, you better go. This might be the break you need." Claire bit her lip. "But I hardly know him. And what if it's not what I think?" Jasmine shrugged, handing over a diner receipt to a customer at the register. Once he left, she turned back to Claire, lowering her voice. "Look, I know you're worried, but the fact is you can't keep up this punishing schedule forever. This might be an opportunity to at least network, or find a better job, or, who knows, maybe even get a little romance back in your life." Claire rolled her eyes. "Romance is the last thing on my mind." "Sure, because you're too busy surviving," Jasmine said softly, sympathy in her eyes. "But maybe you deserve more than just surviving." Claire's heart twisted. Could she really do it? Put on a brave face, walk into a swanky venue, and try to act like she belonged there, even for one night. By the end of her shift, she had made up her mind, though it still felt shaky. She texted James Harlow's number with trembling fingers. "Hello, Mr. Harlow, this is Claire Thompson. Thank you for the invitation. I'm considering it. Could you please let me know the time and place?" It took him less than an hour to respond. "So glad to hear from you, Claire. The dinner starts at 7 p.m. at the Grand Regency Hotel Banquet Hall. Would love to see you there. Let me know if you need anything." Anything. The word seemed loaded. Did she need to ask for help with a dress? A driver? No, that was too humiliating. She decided she'd rummage through the local thrift store on her lunch break tomorrow. Maybe she'd find something classy enough to wear. She replied with a simple "thank you. I'll do my best to come." As the day wore on, her nerves grew in tandem with a flicker of excitement. She found herself checking the time repeatedly, counting down to tomorrow night, then scolding herself for being so foolishly giddy. This was just a dinner, probably a massive function with dozens of powerful people. She'd be lucky if James even remembered her name once the night was over. Yet, beneath her self-deprecating logic, a tiny voice whispered, "Maybe this is the beginning of something else." The next morning, Claire clocked out of Becky's diner with her usual exhaustion, but also with a determination that propelled her down 3 blocks to a local thrift store called Second Chances. A rickety bell jingled overhead as she entered. The shop smelled of old books and laundry detergent, and racks of clothes threatened to topple in the cramped aisles. The store clerk, an older woman with a warm smile, greeted her from behind a cluttered counter. "Looking for anything in particular, dear?" Claire hesitated. "I need something formal for an evening event." The woman's face lit up. "Ah, well, let's see. We got some donated gowns last week. I'll show you where they are." Claire followed her to a corner of the store where a handful of dresses hung in disarray. She rifled through them. Some were too big, others too small or too flamboyant. Then she paused at a midnight blue dress with a simple A-line silhouette, elegant but not too flashy. It looked like it might fit her, though she wouldn't know for sure until she tried. Holding her breath, she made her way to the tiny changing room. The first attempt ended in frustration. The zipper caught halfway, but after adjusting her posture and gently tugging, she got it to slide the rest of the way. Stepping out, she examined her reflection in a smudged mirror. The fabric skimmed her waist without clinging too tightly. It fell just below her knees, showcasing her calves while remaining modest. She turned left and right, apprehension mingled with a hint of awe. She looked, dare she say, good. The color brought out a depth in her brown eyes, and the cut flattered her figure in a way she hadn't experienced in years. She glanced at the price tag, $35. More than she'd hoped to spend, but cheaper than anything new. Besides, she could always return it or resell it if needed. 10 minutes later, she left the thrift store with the dress neatly folded in a plastic bag, her heart pounding with anticipation. She made a quick mental note, rummaged through her closet for some suitable heels and maybe a small clutch. She didn't own much jewelry, but perhaps she could borrow something from Jasmine. As she rode the bus to the corporate building for her janitor's shift, she kept sneaking glances at the plastic bag, as though it held a secret promise. Reality, however, soon sank its claws back in. She had only a few dollars left in her wallet after that purchase, and she still had to gather enough money for rent, if she could find a way to avoid eviction. After finishing her cleaning shift, she raced home to prepare dinner for Lily. Mrs. Gonzalez would be arriving soon to babysit while Claire attended the function. Lily sensed something was different about her mother's routine and gave a quizzical look as Claire moved around the apartment, gathering items. "Mommy, where are you going?" Lily asked, hugging a stuffed unicorn to her chest. Claire knelt down, smoothing back Lily's curls. "I'm going to a fancy dinner for work, sort of. But I'll be back before you wake up, okay?" She forced a reassuring smile. "Will you bring me a cookie from there?" Claire laughed lightly, her anxiety easing. "If they have cookies, I'll bring you one." Lily seemed satisfied and ran off to show her stuffed unicorn some imaginary tea party. Mrs. Gonzalez knocked on the door soon after. Claire ushered her inside, quickly explaining Lily's bedtime routine and leaving money for any emergencies. Then she rushed to the bedroom. She stripped off her work uniform, hopping into a quick shower, washing away the grime and fatigue that clung to her skin. Wrapped in a threadbare towel, she stared at the thrift store dress draped carefully over the chair. Could she really pull this off? She slipped it on, then did her makeup using the small mirror in the bathroom. She seldom wore more than tinted moisturizer and a swipe of lip balm, but tonight she attempted to line her eyes, add a hint of mascara, and dab on a soft pink lipstick. It wasn't perfect. Her eyeliner looked slightly uneven, and her hair refused to hold a neat style. In the end, she pinned her hair back into a low chignon, letting a few tendrils frame her face. She hoped it looked intentionally romantic rather than haphazard. Digging into the back of her closet, she found a pair of black heels with scuffed soles. She'd worn them once to a wedding ages ago. Slipping them on, she realized they were a bit tight, but it would have to do. With her heart hammering, she grabbed a small black clutch that she'd borrowed from Jasmine, who was beyond thrilled about this entire ordeal, and tucked in her phone and James's business card. Before stepping out, she peeked in on Lily, who was watching cartoons with Mrs. Gonzalez. She gave Lily a kiss on the forehead, inhaling the familiar scent of her baby shampoo. Lily looked up and gasped. "You look like a princess, Mommy." Claire's cheeks warmed. "Thank you, sweetheart. Be good for Mrs. Gonzalez, okay?" With that, Claire rushed out into the brisk evening. The city lights glimmered overhead, and she felt an odd surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. The bus ride to the Grand Regency Hotel was nerve-wracking. She drew more than a few curious glances from fellow passengers as she balanced awkwardly on the seat in her evening dress. Each stop felt interminably long, and with every passing minute, her anxiety grew. Finally, she arrived at the hotel, a lavish building with a grand facade, complete with marble pillars and a red-carpeted entrance. She stepped off the bus, the cold night air biting her bare arms. A doorman in a crisp uniform held the door for her, and she hesitated, taking a deep breath. She could still turn back. She could slip away into the night and pretend this whole venture was too far-fetched. But the memory of James's invitation, his confident smile, propelled her forward. She stepped through the grand doors and into a world she'd only ever glimpsed in magazines or from afar while cleaning corporate floors. The lobby soared with intricate chandeliers, plush seating, and polished marble floors that reflected every shimmering light. Wealth and luxury practically radiated from every corner. At a gilded reception desk, she asked for directions to the banquet hall. The attendant gave her a courteous smile and pointed to a set of double doors at the far end of the corridor. With her heart pounding, Claire made her way there, each step echoing as though it might give away her nerves. As she neared the doors, the distant hum of conversation and clinking glasses reached her ears. Fear and excitement warred within her. Just as she was about to push open the door, it swung outward, revealing a group of well-dressed attendees stepping out. Claire nearly collided with a woman in a shimmering silver gown. The woman flashed her a brief, polite nod, not unkind, but certainly reserved. For a moment, Claire considered fleeing. Then, through the parted doors, she spotted James. He stood near a lavishly decorated buffet table, engaged in conversation with a few other sharp-suited individuals. As if sensing her presence, he turned. Their eyes locked across the crowd of mingling elites. A slow, warm smile spread across his face. He lightly excused himself from the group and started toward her. Claire inhaled shakily. This was it. No turning back now. She stepped forward, heart in her throat, as he reached her side. "I'm so glad you came," he said, voice low and genuinely pleased. Claire fought the urge to fidget with her dress. "Thank you for inviting me." They hovered for a moment in that opulent space, his gaze sweeping over her with a flicker of admiration. In that instant, Claire felt an inexplicable sense of belonging, as if maybe, just maybe, this was exactly where she was meant to be. A passing waiter offered them champagne flutes from a silver tray. Claire hesitated. She rarely drank, given how expensive and impractical it was, but she accepted the flute, if only to have something to occupy her trembling hands. James guided her into the room, pointing out notable guests. She listened politely, though half the names and titles washed over her in a blur of politeness and high society jargon. The banquet hall was colossal, every table draped in white linen, each centerpiece a glittering arrangement of fresh flowers and crystals. Soft classical music wafted from a small ensemble at the far side of the hall. As they walked, she felt eyes on her, some curious, others dismissive, and a few outright puzzled, as if trying to place who she was in their mental hierarchy of important people. Despite her self-consciousness, James never left her side, introducing her graciously to colleagues and peers. "This is Claire Thompson," he said to a gray-haired man in a bespoke suit. "We met recently and I was eager for her to experience our event tonight." The man nodded politely, though his eyes flickered with mild suspicion. Claire forced a smile and gave a small wave, her voice catching in her throat. She felt like an imposter among these titans of industry, but James, seemingly undeterred by the social gap, continued to usher her around, making light conversation and occasionally leaning down to whisper funny anecdotes about certain people. She found herself laughing more than she expected, loosening some of the tension in her chest. At dinner, they were seated at a round table covered in fine china and crystal stemware. The meal was a lavish, multi-course affair, each dish presented like a piece of edible art. Claire fumbled slightly with the array of forks and knives, uncertain which utensil to use for each course. But whenever she hesitated, James discreetly guided her by example, never drawing attention to her unfamiliarity. She tried to ease her panic by focusing on the flavors of the food: a delicate lobster bisque, a perfectly seared filet mignon, and a decadent chocolate mousse for dessert. Each bite seemed to melt on her tongue, a stark contrast to the bargain bin groceries she typically purchased. All the while, conversation ebbed and flowed around them about corporate deals, the rising tech market, international expansions. Claire stayed mostly silent, hoping not to betray her lack of knowledge. But occasionally James steered the talk toward more general topics: charities, current events, even the environment, and invited her to share her thoughts. She contributed cautiously, refusing to let her nerves silence her completely. After dinner, the attendees drifted toward the adjoining ballroom for after-dinner mingling. Claire found herself beside James near a tall window overlooking the glittering cityscape. She took a moment to catch her breath, letting her gaze wander over the dazzling skyline. "You all right?" he asked softly, stepping closer. She exhaled, nodding. "Yes, this is all so surreal." James studied her face, a thoughtful expression curving his lips. "I imagine it must be overwhelming. I'm sorry if this was too much. I wanted you to see a different world tonight. Maybe let you step away from the grind you face every day." She heard genuine concern in his voice, and her chest tightened with gratitude. "It's not your fault," she managed with a small laugh. "I'm grateful, honestly. I've never experienced anything like this before." Their eyes locked, and Claire became acutely aware of how close they were standing. She thought of Lily at home, asleep, and of her messy, complicated life. This moment was like stepping into someone else's existence, a fleeting bubble that would soon pop. But James didn't look at her like she was an imposter. His gaze was gentle, accepting. It made her feel special. Before she could dwell on that, a slender woman in a designer gown approached, offering James a practiced smile. She had glossy dark hair swept into an elegant chignon and carried herself like a runway model. Her eyes flicked between Claire and James, curiosity alight in her perfectly painted gaze. "James," she cooed, pressing a hand lightly to his arm in a gesture of familiarity. "I wondered where you'd disappeared to." She then gave Claire a scrutinizing once-over. "And who is this?" Claire tensed, feeling suddenly self-conscious. James shifted his stance. "This is Claire Thompson," he said coolly. "She's my guest for the evening." The woman's brows rose, though she quickly masked her surprise. "Oh? I'm Fiona Lansing, an old associate of James's. So nice to meet you." Her tone dripped with the forced politeness of someone who already judged Claire's worth, or lack thereof. Claire mustered a polite smile. "Likewise." Fiona turned to James, ignoring Claire now. "You promised me a dance earlier, remember?" James's jaw tightened subtly. "I didn't promise, Fiona. I said I'd see about it." She let out a tinkling laugh. "You know how I love the waltz. Besides, it's for old time's sake." A flicker of something passed through James's eyes. Annoyance, regret, maybe both. Then he turned to Claire. Would you mind if I stepped away for a moment? Claire forced herself to smile. Not at all. Go ahead. James hesitated, searching her expression for any hint of discomfort. Finally, he nodded, following Fiona toward the dance floor, leaving Claire standing by the window with her swirling thoughts. From a distance, she watched them. Fiona pressed close to James, her hand resting on his shoulder, her lips curving in a knowing smile. Claire felt a pang of jealousy, which baffled her. She had no claim on James, no reason to assume anything beyond a one-time invitation. Still, seeing him in the arms of a poised, affluent woman served as a jarring reminder. These were his people. This was the world he belonged to. She glanced around, suddenly feeling out of place again. A few other women eyed her with that same polite disinterest or curiosity. She decided she could use some air. Gathering her courage, she slipped out of the ballroom and found a quieter corridor leading to a small balcony. The city lights stretched out before her, and the cool breeze felt refreshing on her flushed cheeks. She leaned against the railing, inhaling the night air, letting it calm her racing heart. Why had she come here, really? What did she expect to gain? A fleeting night of glamour wouldn't change her reality of overdue bills and meager wages. Yet, something about James Harlow pulled at her emotions in a way she couldn't deny. His kindness, his quiet sincerity, the way he looked at her like she mattered. "Claire?" She turned, startled. James stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, a hint of concern in his eyes. "I saw you leave. Are you okay?" She smiled softly. "Yes, I needed some fresh air. It's quite stuffy in there." He nodded, moving to stand beside her at the railing. For a moment, they stared at the city lights together, comfortable silence enveloping them. She realized he smelled faintly of cedar and something else faintly spicy. The swirl of emotions in her chest grew heavier. "I'm sorry about Fiona," he said finally. "We dated a long time ago, and she still shows up at events occasionally. She's persistent." Claire nodded, unsure how to respond. He turned to face her, his voice earnest. "I invited you tonight because I saw something in you. Strength, resilience. You're working 3 jobs, raising a daughter, doing your best. You deserve more than just scraping by." Her throat tightened. "You say that like it's so simple." "It's not simple," he agreed, gaze flicking across her face. "But sometimes, all it takes is one opportunity to step into a different path. I'm not talking about charity or pity. I'm talking about, maybe I can help. Maybe I can offer you a position at Harlow Innovations, something that pays more than your current jobs combined. You're obviously capable and hardworking. Would you be interested in that?" Claire's eyes widened. The breath caught in her lungs. A job? At Harlow Innovations? That was a game changer. Enough pay to keep her afloat to give Lily the life she deserved. But the cynic in her whispered, "He's offering you a fairy tale solution because he pities you." She cleared her throat. I don't know what to say. That sounds too good to be true." "What kind of position?" James shrugged. "We can discuss it. You're good with people. I saw that at the diner. You have attention to detail as demonstrated in your cleaning work. We have administrative roles, customer relations positions, and if you're willing, I can sponsor training or classes to help you transition into a role you'll excel in." A swirl of gratitude, hope, and disbelief filled her. "James," she began, struggling to find the right words. "I can't tell if you're just being nice, or if this is some kind of—" He gently placed a hand over hers on the railing. "It's not charity. It's a genuine proposition. I see talent in you, and I don't want it wasted on menial work if there's a chance you'd be happier and more fulfilled elsewhere." She exhaled shakily, her gaze locked on his. In his eyes, she saw sincerity, kindness, and something more, respect. It made her want to trust him, to believe in the possibility he was offering. Before she could respond, the distant chime of a clock announced it was well past 9. She realized with a start that Mrs. Gonzalez was expecting her back soon. Guilt and reality rushed in. I have to go," she said, stepping back. "My daughter's with a sitter and it's late." James nodded understandingly. "I'll have a car take you home." She shook her head. No, it's okay. I can catch the bus. The last thing she needed was a reminder of how different their worlds were. But as she saw the flicker of concern in his eyes, she relented. All right, but just to the nearest station. He hesitated, then agreed. Fine, at least let me walk you to the lobby. The warmth of his hand lightly guiding her elbow as they returned to the main hall was almost too much for her overwhelmed heart. At the entrance, he signaled a valet to bring around a sleek black sedan. Claire's protests died in her throat. She was bone-tired, and the thought of a warm, safe ride was too tempting to refuse. Before she got in, James pressed his business card into her hand, this time with a personal note scribbled on the back about meeting soon to discuss job opportunities. She stared at the handwriting, then up at him. A sudden wave of emotion hit her. Hope, fear, longing, gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. He offered a small smile, something deeper flickering in his eyes. Good night, Claire. We'll talk soon. With that, she sank into the car's plush seat, her heart thundering as the driver eased away from the curb. Out the window, she watched James, his tall figure silhouetted against the hotel's lights, until he disappeared from view. Claire's reflection lingered in the sedan's window, her expression a swirl of exhaustion and cautious hope. She turned the card over in her hands, reading James's note again. He was offering her something she desperately needed, an escape from the relentless cycle of underpaid work. But could she trust it? By the time she got home, Lily was already asleep. Mrs. Gonzalez, her kindly face etched with curiosity, asked how the evening went. It was nice, Claire said, struggling to compress the experience into that small word. Once alone in her cramped bedroom, she slipped off the dress and hung it carefully. Gazing at her tired reflection in the mirror, she tried to reconcile the glamorous evening with the persistent knot in her chest. She wanted to believe James's offer was genuine, but fear of disappointment made her cautious. Life had taught her that miracles rarely came without a catch. Despite her doubts, the next morning she messaged him. Thank you again. I'd like to talk more about the job opportunity when you have time. She bit her lip, hitting send. The last thing she wanted was to appear desperate, even though desperation was etched into her reality. James replied promptly, Of course. Let's meet at my office tomorrow afternoon if you're free. 3 p.m. Claire's schedule was always tight, but she realized she could shuffle a few things around. She asked Becky's diner for an extra hour break between shifts, and although Stan grumbled, he eventually said yes. The following day, Claire found herself standing at the doors of Harlow Innovations, a sense of déjà vu sweeping over her. She took a deep breath, heart hammering, as she approached the reception desk. A neatly dressed woman with a professional smile greeted her. I'm here to see Mr. Harlow, Claire stammered. Your name, please? Claire Thompson. The receptionist checked a digital schedule, then nodded. Please go to the 32nd floor. His assistant will guide you to his office. Claire managed a polite thanks, stepping into the elevator. She watched the numbers climb rapidly. The elevator opened onto a sleek corridor of polished wood floors and glass walls. A slender woman with a blue blazer met her at the elevator. You must be Claire. Right this way, she said in a clipped, efficient tone. Claire followed, doing her best to keep her posture confident, though nerves flickered in her belly. They passed a row of offices with employees working diligently. Some glanced up, mildly curious, but didn't stare. At the end of the hall stood a set of double glass doors embossed with James Harlow, CEO. The assistant opened them, ushering Claire in. James stood by a large window, phone in hand, looking out at the city. Upon hearing them, he turned, a smile lighting his features. Claire, welcome. He thanked his assistant, who shut the door, leaving them alone. She offered a small wave. Hi, thank you for seeing me. He gestured to a comfortable seat near his desk. Thanks for coming. Please have a seat. Can I get you anything? Coffee, tea, water? She shook her head politely, sitting down with her hands folded in her lap to steady her nerves. James settled into the chair opposite her, leaning forward, his expression open and inviting. I appreciate you coming in, he began. I asked HR to put together a few potential roles that might fit your skill set and availability. Entry-level administrative support, receptionist for a client-facing team, or even a position on our facilities team, though I suspect you're looking for something beyond cleaning floors. She swallowed hard, flipping through a neat stack of papers he handed her. Each listed a salary range, benefits, and basic job responsibilities. Her eyes blurred over the numbers, hardly believing the figures listed. It was more money than she'd ever earned, even in a year of waitressing and cleaning, and health insurance, paid time off. These were luxuries she'd hardly dared to dream about. "James, this is..." She trailed off, unable to find words. He gave a small nod. "I know it's a lot to process. I'm sure you have questions." She looked up, meeting his gaze. "Why? Why would you do this for me? We hardly know each other." His expression turned serious, introspective. "I grew up in less than ideal circumstances. My father built this company from scratch, but our personal finances were another story. We faced a lot of hardships at first. I've never forgotten how it felt to watch my mother struggle, the way you're struggling now. If someone had given her a shot, a real, honest shot, things might have been different for us sooner." Claire's heart squeezed. She saw genuine empathy in his eyes, the shadow of old hurt. She wanted to reach across and offer comfort, but she fought the urge. "Well, I'm glad things worked out for you," she said softly. He nodded. "Now I have a chance to help others. Let's just say I see potential in you. You're smart, hardworking, and kind. That kind of attitude is valuable here." She flipped the pages again, her eyes skimming over the job titles. Administrative support coordinator, receptionist, even an entry-level data entry position. Each promised a stable, full-time wage with benefits. Her mind spun. She'd never felt so simultaneously relieved and terrified. Tamping down her vulnerability, she cleared her throat. "I'd be lying if I said this isn't incredible. But I also need to be honest, I have a daughter. I can't stay late at the office, and there might be days she's sick." James raised a hand to gently interrupt. "Harlow Innovations supports working parents. We have flexible scheduling, especially in our administrative departments. We also have an on-site daycare if that helps. Or we can arrange reimbursements for childcare. Don't worry, we'll make it work." Tears pricked the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away, refusing to cry in front of him. "Thank you," she whispered. This could change everything." A faint smile curved his lips. "That's the goal. Now let's talk specifics. Which position stands out to you?" They discussed the job descriptions one by one. Claire admitted she wasn't fully proficient in spreadsheets or certain software, but James assured her the company provided training. Eventually, they settled on a receptionist role for a mid-level department, something that played to her strengths in customer service from her diner experience without overwhelming her right away. He described typical working hours, around 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., with an hour lunch break. Fridays had an option for half-days in the summertime. The pay was more than Claire had made working 3 jobs combined. She felt giddy, a spark of real hope igniting in her chest. "So, are you interested?" James asked finally, studying her face. Her throat felt tight. "Yes," she managed. "Absolutely. When can I start?" He chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "As soon as you'd like. We'll need to do some paperwork, get you set up with HR. But if you give your notice to your other job soon, we can aim for next Monday, or even earlier if you prefer." Claire sank back in her seat, barely believing what she was hearing. 1 week. 1 week until her life changed. "Thank you," she breathed again. "I don't know how to repay you for this." James's gaze softened. "You don't owe me anything. Just do good work. Be the same kind-hearted person you are now. And maybe allow me to take you and your daughter out to celebrate sometime." Her heart fluttered. Celebrating with James, introducing him to Lily, felt like a step far more intimate than a single dinner at a fancy hotel. But the offer warmed her from the inside. "I'd like that," she said shyly. He stood, offering his hand to shake, formal and businesslike. Claire rose too, placing her hand in his. The warmth of his palm sent a slight tremor through her. Their eyes met and held for a fraction longer than a typical handshake might warrant. Then he withdrew, clearing his throat. "All right, let's get you over to HR. Susan can help finalize the paperwork." She nodded, stepping toward the door, but before she exited, she turned back, expression earnest. "Really, James, thank you. I won't let you down." He smiled, gentle, confident. "I know you won't." As she left his office, an unshakable feeling of awe coursed through her. She was no longer just a struggling single mom with 3 dead-end jobs. She had a chance, an honest-to-goodness chance, at building a stable life for herself and Lily. And it was all because of James Harlow, the man who had seen her worth when no one else bothered to look. The following week sped by in a whirlwind of preparations. Claire agonized over quitting her jobs. Becky's diner was the hardest. She had fond memories of Becky's kindness and her co-workers' solidarity. But ultimately, they understood. Jasmine squealed in excitement when she heard about Claire's new opportunity. Hugging her so tightly, Claire nearly dropped a coffee pot. At the janitorial agency, her boss took the news with resigned indifference, focusing more on how to fill her slot than on her reasons for leaving. The convenience store manager, on the other hand, grumbled incessantly, complaining that kids these days, never mind Claire was 30, didn't know the value of hard work. Claire rolled her eyes but kept her tone polite, unwilling to burn any bridges she might need in the future. She spent her final shifts feeling a curious sense of detachment, already imagining what her new life would be like. Could she really handle one stable, full-time job? Would she acclimate to an office environment after years of physically demanding labor? Every doubt was countered by the memory of James's unwavering confidence. He believed in her, and she was determined not to let him down. The day before she started at Harlow Innovations, she decided to celebrate with Lily in their own small way. She used a portion of her tip money to buy a modest pizza and rented a children's movie. Mother and daughter curled up on their threadbare couch, giggling over animated characters while enjoying the rare treat of pepperoni slices dripping with cheese. Lily leaned against Claire's shoulder halfway through the movie, her small hand resting on her mother's arm. "Mommy, are you really going to get a new job?" she asked, voice filled with wonder. Claire pressed a kiss to Lily's hair. "Yes, sweetheart. It's in a big office building. I'll be a receptionist." Lily's eyes widened. "A receptionist? What's that?" Claire smiled. "I'll help people when they come in. Answer phones, greet guests, maybe use a computer. I'll be like the friendly person who welcomes everybody." Lily grinned, settling back into the couch. "That sounds fun. Will you get more money?" Claire stifled a laugh at Lily's bluntness. "Yes, I'll earn more money so we can get better stuff. Maybe a bigger apartment someday." Lily's face lit up. "Can I have my own room?" The earnestness in her daughter's gaze made Claire's heart ache with both pride and regret. "I hope so, Lily. Let's keep our fingers crossed." After the movie ended, Claire tucked Lily into bed, reading her a story about princesses who rescued themselves. She glanced around their tiny, cluttered space. Soon, if all went well, they could afford to move somewhere a bit nicer. That thought carried her through the night, a buoyant bubble of hope that helped her sleep deeply. Monday morning arrived. Claire dressed carefully in black slacks and a crisp white blouse she'd found at the thrift store, pairing them with low black heels. Her hair, pulled back into a neat ponytail, still refused to lie flat in some places, but she did her best to tame it with hairpins and a bit of spray. She dropped Lily off at the local school breakfast program before heading to Harlow Innovations. A tingle of nerves danced in her stomach as she entered the building's gleaming lobby, remembering how she'd once wandered these halls with a janitorial cart. Taking the elevator to the 20th floor, where her new department was located, she gave herself a silent pep talk. "You belong here now. You have a desk, a phone, and a paycheck. Don't let them see your fear." The elevator opened to a bustling reception area. A large modern sign read, "Harlow Innovations, Client Relations and Marketing Department." Susan from HR greeted her with a friendly wave, leading her to a desk near the entrance. "This is your station," she explained, showing Claire the computer, phone system, and various office supplies. "We'll have someone from IT come up to set up your accounts. For now, you can shadow Jordan, our lead receptionist, until you get comfortable." Claire nodded, taking in every detail. The desk was sleek, the phone a multi-line system with far more buttons than she'd ever used before. She took a seat, acutely aware of how plush the office chair was compared to the rickety stool she'd used at the convenience store. Jordan, a cheerful woman in her late 20s, bustled over. "Hey, you must be Claire. Congrats on the new position. I'll show you the ropes." She gave a welcoming grin that eased Claire's anxiety. By mid-morning, Claire had taken a few calls, greeted visitors, and already discovered that the department's staff was mostly friendly and helpful. She tried to soak it all in, from the correct greeting script for inbound calls to how to transfer a client to different extensions. Every so often she fumbled, pressing the wrong button or momentarily forgetting a name. But Jordan patiently corrected her, and no one seemed upset by small mistakes on her first day. Around noon, James himself appeared, strolling through the reception area with a purposeful stride. He caught sight of Claire and offered a warm smile. "Welcome aboard," he said, just loud enough for her to hear. She smiled back, heart skipping a beat. She wondered if he'd linger to chat, but a brisk-looking man in a pinstriped suit approached him, launching into a discussion about quarterly metrics. They disappeared down the hallway, leaving Claire with a mild sense of longing. She couldn't very well dash after him. She had a job to do. Nonetheless, just seeing him in his element reminded her of how drastically her life had shifted in such a short span. She vowed to prove his faith in her wasn't misplaced. The next few weeks fell into a steady rhythm. Claire learned the ins and outs of the receptionist role, organizing schedules, booking conference rooms, liaising with other departments. Her confidence grew as each day passed without major fiascos. Lily settled into a routine too, attending school while Mrs. Gonzalez helped with after-school care until Claire's shift ended. Financially, life improved almost immediately. Claire could pay her bills on time and even started saving a little. She'd made arrangements with her landlord to catch up on overdue rent, and the looming threat of eviction disappeared. For the first time in years, she felt stable, like her life wasn't a constant battle against the clock and her wallet. Through it all, James occasionally dropped by the department. Sometimes he came for official meetings. Other times he seemed to simply check in. He'd stop to ask Claire how she was doing, or if she needed any additional resources. Each interaction sent tiny flutters through her chest, but she kept their exchanges professional. Outside of work, they exchanged a handful of texts, mostly about how she was settling in or how Lily was doing. She sensed he wanted to maintain a respectful distance, mindful not to overstep in the workplace environment. But whenever they spoke, a current of unspoken possibility crackled in the air. Then, one Friday afternoon, as Claire was shutting down her computer, her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Busy tonight?" Her heart jolted. She glanced around, ensuring no one was peeking at her phone. "I'm just finishing work. Why? I'd like to take you and Lily to dinner if you're up for it." Her throat tightened. Inviting her daughter? That was a serious gesture, personal. Yet Lily had already been pestering for pizza or ice cream. Maybe this would be a nice treat. And part of her wanted James to meet the most important person in her world. "That sounds great," she replied, summoning her courage. "We're free. Where should we meet you?" "There's a family-friendly restaurant near your place, I believe. Anton's Pizzeria. I can pick you both up at 6. She typed back, "All right, see you then." Nerves sparkled through her like electricity. She shut off her computer, waved goodbye to Jordan, and practically sprinted for the elevator. She had just enough time to collect Lily from Mrs. Gonzalez, freshen up at home, and prepare them both for dinner with James Harlow. As she rode the bus home, she stared at her reflection in the window, her mind racing. "Calm down," she told herself. "It's just dinner, nothing more." But she couldn't quell the tiny voice, hoping it would be the start of something special. By 6 o'clock, Claire had managed to change into a simple blouse and jeans, while Lily wore her favorite pink dress paired with white sneakers. She'd even combed Lily's hair into 2 neat pigtails. When James's car pulled up to the curb outside their building, Claire guided Lily down the steps. The driver stepped out to open the back door, but James himself emerged, greeting Lily with a friendly smile. "You must be Lily," he said, bending slightly to her level. "I'm James. It's nice to meet you." Lily blinked her big brown eyes at him, shy at first. "Hi," she mumbled, clutching Claire's hand. Claire gave James a grateful nod. Thanks for picking us up. He shrugged lightly, smiling. My pleasure. Inside the car, Lily gawked at the plush interior. She giggled when James offered to let her choose the music on the radio. Soon, a pop station filled the car, Lily bobbing her head along in excitement. Claire cast James an appreciative look, touched by the genuine effort he was making to connect with her daughter. Anton's Pizzeria was a cozy, bustling spot. They found a booth near the window where Lily perched on the cushioned seat, pointing out cartoonish pizza decorations. James let her place the order, and she proudly announced her preference for extra cheese. While waiting for the food, James asked Lily about school. She launched into a story about her art class, describing a painting she made of unicorns in a forest. Claire watched them with a mix of warmth and awe. James seemed genuinely interested, nodding and asking follow-up questions that made Lily blossom with excitement. They shared a large pizza, Lily devouring slice after slice while regaling them with tales of her 6-year-old adventures. Claire occasionally jumped in to clarify or fill the gaps. The atmosphere was relaxed and surprisingly natural, as though they'd been doing this for ages rather than the very first time. After dinner, James suggested they check out the small arcade section near the restaurant's entrance. Lily's eyes lit up at the sight of claw machines and racing games. James handed her a few quarters, guiding her to a game while Claire watched from a short distance, heart swelling with gratitude. She couldn't help but notice how easily James adapted to Lily's presence, patiently helping her aim the claw to grab a stuffed toy. In the end, Lily won a small purple unicorn, squealing with delight. She immediately named it Sparkles and demanded to show it to Mommy and Mr. James. He grinned, offering Claire a slightly sheepish expression. I think I might be having more fun than she is. Claire smiled back, her chest tight with unexpected emotion. You're great with her. Something flickered in his eyes, a mix of relief and soft admiration. She's a special kid. Reminds me a bit of myself at that age. Oh yeah? Claire teased, arching an eyebrow. You were obsessed with unicorns too? He laughed, a warm, genuine sound. Maybe not unicorns specifically, but I had a huge imagination. My dad used to pretend with me that we could build anything we wanted. With the night winding down, James drove them home. Lily had grown quiet, resting her head on Claire's lap. The excitement of the evening had clearly worn her out. At the curb of their apartment building, James turned off the engine, stepping out to open the door. Claire carefully lifted Lily, who was half asleep, into her arms. The little girl stirred, blinking drowsily at James. Thank you for pizza, she murmured before drifting back into slumber. James smiled tenderly. She's adorable. Claire nodded, feeling a sudden rush of gratitude and affection. Tonight was wonderful. Thank you. He hesitated for a moment, then reached out to gently tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so intimate, it sent a wave of warmth coursing through her. Thank you for letting me be part of it, he said quietly. They stood there, the night air cool against their skin, Lily's soft breathing the only sound. For a brief moment, it felt as though something new was blossoming between them, fragile, tentative, but undeniably present. Claire tore her gaze away, mindful of the weight in her arms. Good night, James, she whispered. Good night, he replied, stepping back to let her go. As she climbed the stairs, Lily stirring against her shoulder, Claire's mind reeled. This wasn't just a friendly gesture anymore. It felt like the beginning of a deeper connection. But could she afford to let herself feel that way about her boss, a millionaire CEO, when she was only just finding her footing in a new life? Spring gradually settled over the city, the chill in the wind softening into gentle breezes. Claire had been at Harlow Innovations for 2 months now, and each day brought small victories, mastering the phone system, handling tricky client calls, receiving warm feedback from colleagues. She no longer felt like an imposter. She was part of the team. Her finances stabilized too. She'd paid off her overdue rent and had enough set aside to move to a modest 2-bedroom in a safer neighborhood, a place where Lily could have her own room. The landlord was friendly, the building well-maintained. They'd be moving in next week. Lily was over the moon, already drawing pictures of how she wanted to decorate her new room. Through it all, James checked in, offering support and occasionally sharing a coffee break with Claire to hear about her progress. They kept their interaction professional at work, but the undertone of personal warmth never left. Outside the office, they continued to share dinners, sometimes with Lily, sometimes just the two of them. It was a delicate dance, navigating this growing bond while maintaining professionalism, yet neither seemed eager to pull away. On a sunny Friday afternoon, James called Claire into his office. She stepped in, heart lightly thrumming. He gestured for her to sit in one of the plush chairs, then closed the door, a secretive smile playing on his lips. "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a small envelope from his desk drawer. She tilted her head, curiosity piqued. "What is it?" He handed her the envelope, which bore a faint scent of jasmine. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a formal invitation on thick, cream-colored cardstock. It read, "You are cordially invited to an evening gala celebrating the expansion of Harlow Innovations." Claire glanced up, brow furrowing. "A gala?" James nodded. "It's a fundraising event we host annually, but this year it's extra special because we're celebrating opening offices overseas, plus some philanthropic initiatives. I'd love for you to be there as my guest." Her heart jolted. Another high society event. Memories of that first luxurious dinner came rushing back, her anxiety, her sense of not belonging, but also the thrill of stepping into a world she never thought possible. She swallowed hard. "James, you know I appreciate the invitation. But are you sure? Won't it raise eyebrows if I'm there as your guest?" His expression softened. "It's not uncommon for employees to attend, especially if they're part of the company's success story. And you, Claire, are part of our success story. You've grown tremendously since joining, and I want everyone to see that Harlow Innovations invests in people who have potential." A flutter of pride and nervousness swirled in her chest. "I'd be honored then," she said quietly. The corner of his mouth quirked up. "Excellent. I'm glad to hear it." She studied the ornate lettering on the invitation, a tingle of déjà vu. Another dress to find, more small talk with wealthy strangers. But this time she had a bit more confidence. She was employed at Harlow Innovations, no longer an outsider looking in. The weeks leading up to the gala were a flurry of preparations. With a stable paycheck now, Claire decided to buy a new dress, something that truly fit her and didn't come from the thrift store clearance rack. She saved a portion of each paycheck, scanning sale announcements from various boutiques, determined to find something classy yet affordable. She settled on a deep emerald gown with a sweetheart neckline and a flowing skirt that skimmed her ankles. Subtle beading along the waist added a touch of sparkle without being overwhelming. The moment she tried it on in the dressing room, she felt a wave of confidence unlike anything she'd experienced before. Yes, it was pricier than her previous finds, but it was worth it for this special occasion. Finally, the gala night arrived. She arranged for Mrs. Gonzalez to watch Lily overnight. It was a bittersweet arrangement. Lily was disappointed she couldn't attend. But James had told Claire the gala was more formal and not exactly child-friendly. Lily consoled herself by making Claire promise to take lots of pictures. Claire took extra care with her makeup that evening, soft, smoky eyes and a hint of rose lipstick. She swept her hair into an elegant updo, pinned with sparkling clips. The emerald gown fit perfectly, accentuating her figure in a way that felt simultaneously modest and alluring. When James's driver arrived, Claire stepped out of her new apartment building, feeling the mild spring breeze against her bare shoulders. James emerged from the back seat, wearing a tailored black tuxedo. The sight of him took her breath away. He grinned when he saw her, his eyes lighting with admiration. "You look stunning," he breathed. Her cheeks warmed. "Thank you. You're not so bad yourself." He offered his arm, leading her to the waiting car. The ride to the venue felt charged with anticipation. Claire's nerves danced, but James's calm presence grounded her. He gave her a reassuring smile, covering her hand with his. No words were needed. The gala was held at a grand ballroom downtown, complete with red carpet leading to gilded double doors. Cameras flashed as important guests arrived, business magnates, celebrities, philanthropists. Claire felt a twinge of anxiety at the sight of photographers snapping shots. But James guided her firmly, offering a confident nod to the press. As they entered, a wave of elegant music and low chatter washed over them. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead, reflecting light off marble floors. Lavish floral arrangements stood in tall vases, while waiters glided among the crowd offering champagne flutes and canapes. James kept a hand at Claire's lower back, gently steering her through the throng of well-dressed attendees. He introduced her to key figures, various department heads, investors, charity representatives. She smiled politely, answering their questions about her role at Harlow Innovations. Some recognized her name as the new hire James had personally recommended, but no one was overtly rude. A few even seemed genuinely impressed by her progress, which bolstered her confidence. Partway through the night, James was pulled away by a conversation with an investor. Claire drifted near the edge of the ballroom, sipping her champagne and surveying the crowd. She felt proud of herself for handling small talk, for standing tall in this sophisticated arena. No one here knew how many times she'd cried over unpaid bills or rummaged thrift stores for secondhand clothes. A familiar voice cut through her thoughts. Well, if it isn't the surprise star of the evening. Claire turned, spotting Fiona Lansing, the same woman from the previous dinner, the tall brunette with a polished, almost haughty air. She wore a shimmering silver gown, as striking as before, her dark hair swept into an immaculate updo. "Hello?" Claire said, polite but cautious. Fiona offered a thin smile. "I hear James gave you quite the opportunity. Receptionist, wasn't it?" Claire nodded. "Yes, in the client relations department. It's a good job." Fiona's lips curved, though the warmth didn't reach her eyes. "Indeed. James is well known for his generosity. Almost too generous sometimes. I suppose you've been enjoying all the perks, hmm?" Claire stiffened, sensing the insinuation. "I'm just grateful to have stable work that allows me to support my daughter." Fiona waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, I'm sure. And James is such a knight in shining armor, isn't he?" She paused, letting the question dangle. "Just be careful, dear. Not everyone is who they seem in these circles." With that ominous remark, Fiona glided away, leaving Claire feeling unsettled. She tried to shake off the encounter, reminding herself that James had never been anything but kind and transparent with her. Fiona's words felt like a deliberate attempt to sow doubt. A moment later, James reappeared at her side, brow furrowed. "You okay?" She took a shaky breath. "Yes, I'm fine. Fiona just had some interesting comments." He sighed, glancing in Fiona's direction. "I'm sorry. She's always had a complicated way of handling things. Don't pay attention to her." Claire forced a smile. "I won't." He offered an arm again. "How about some fresh air? There's a terrace overlooking the river." She nodded eagerly. The crowded ballroom had become stifling. Out on the terrace, soft lanterns illuminated a wide balcony overlooking the city lights and the shimmering river below. The sounds of the gala faded behind them, replaced by the gentle rush of the night breeze. Claire leaned against the stone balustrade, taking a slow breath. James stood beside her, quiet for a moment. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "I want you to know, I'm not like Fiona might suggest. Whatever she said, I invited you here because I respect you, not for any hidden agenda." Claire turned, meeting his steady gaze. "I believe you," she said softly. "But..." She paused, gathering courage. "But what are we doing, James? You've changed my life, and I'm so grateful. I don't want to complicate things at work, and I'm afraid to let myself feel more than gratitude." James reached for her hand, interlacing their fingers. "I understand. This is all new, and there's a professional boundary to consider." He moved closer, his voice growing warm. "But Claire, I can't ignore the feelings I've developed for you. You've captivated me from the moment I saw you at that diner. Everything since has only shown me more of your strength, kindness, and resilience. I care about you, deeply." Her heart hammered. In the golden glow of the lanterns, she saw sincerity etched into every line of his face. She swallowed hard, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "I care about you too. You've been so generous, not just with money, but with understanding and compassion." He lifted her hand, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture made her breath catch. "Then maybe we can figure this out together," We can go slow. Keep our work life separate from our personal one if we have to. But I don't want to pretend I don't feel something for you, Claire." She nodded, tears threatening to spill. "I don't either." In that tender moment, their defenses crumbled. He leaned in, and she closed the distance, their lips meeting in a soft, tentative kiss. The world seemed to fade away, the city lights, the music, even the memory of Fiona's barbed words. All that remained was warmth, a sense of belonging, and the delicate promise of a future she'd never dared to believe possible. When they finally broke apart, a flush of emotion lit Claire's cheeks. James let out a quiet chuckle, almost as if he couldn't believe his luck. "I've been wanting to do that for a while," he admitted sheepishly. She laughed softly, pressing her forehead against his. "Me too." They stood there on the terrace, hand in hand, hearts full of a new kind of courage. Beyond the balustrade, the river shimmered, and the city stretched out in all its complex beauty, a perfect reflection of the journey they both still had ahead. For Claire, no matter what challenges might come, she knew she wouldn't have to face them alone anymore. And that was the greatest surprise of all. Over the months that followed, Claire Thompson's life blossomed in ways she never imagined. She thrived in her new role, eventually moving from receptionist to an administrative coordinator position. Her diligence and natural people skills earned praise, and James supported every step of her professional growth, ensuring she received the necessary training and mentorship. At home, she and Lily settled comfortably into their two-bedroom apartment. Lily's room overflowed with colorful drawings, stuffed animals, and cheerful laughter. Claire sometimes caught herself standing in the doorway, marveling at how quickly their circumstances had turned around. No more constant dread of eviction notices or juggling 3 exhausting jobs. She actually had time and energy to spend with Lily, to help with homework, play games, or just talk about their days. Her relationship with James deepened, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. They navigated the complexities of an office romance carefully, keeping it discreet while ensuring Claire was never treated differently at work. Eventually, they made it public in a calm, professional manner, once their colleagues understood Claire's promotions were based on her merits, not favoritism. James introduced Claire and Lily to his parents, who were warm and kind, delighted to see their son so genuinely happy. Lily adored James's mother, a retired schoolteacher who doted on her like a second grandma. Holidays and weekends became opportunities for family gatherings, a sense of belonging that Claire had almost forgotten existed. Of course, life wasn't without its ups and downs. On occasion, rumors or whispers in the company floated around, questioning the origins of Claire's swift rise. Fiona lingered on the periphery, sometimes throwing scornful glances. But none of that overshadowed the truth. Claire had proven her worth through honest work and dedication, and James's faith in her continued to shine through every success. The turning point came a year after Claire joined Harlow Innovations. The company expanded further, and James organized another celebratory dinner. This time, Claire stood proudly by his side, an integral member of the team. Colleagues offered genuine congratulations, recalling her humble start and applauding her journey. Later that evening, when the festivities quieted, James guided her to a secluded corner, away from the crowd. Gazing into her eyes, he took a deep breath, producing a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Claire's heart skittered into overdrive. "Claire," he began, voice trembling with emotion, "you've shown me a love and a strength I never knew I needed. You and Lily have become the center of my life. I want to be a permanent part of your world, and I want you to be a permanent part of mine. Will you marry me?" Tears glistened in her eyes as she glanced at the simple yet elegant diamond ring. She thought of Lily, of the journeys they'd both taken, of the moment she'd first met James in that diner. Her chest swelled with gratitude and love so powerful it was almost painful. "Yes," she breathed, smiling through her tears. "Yes, of course." He slid the ring onto her finger, gathering her into his arms. As he held her close, a wave of peace and joy surged through her, a testament to how far she'd come, from a frightened single mom clutching an eviction notice in a dim alleyway to a beloved partner in a life filled with promise. In the distance, a gentle orchestral tune played, the lights of the city twinkling in silent applause. Claire pressed her cheek against James's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and allowed herself to hope boldly for a future where love, security, and happiness were no longer distant dreams, but the vivid reality of her every waking day.